The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. Welcome to the CareGiver Reality Show with your hosts, David Levy and Paul Vadiato, who bring you more than a combined 25 years of practical experience, helping thousands of family caregivers, helping them find solutions to the challenges and frustrations presented by this important responsibility. So if you are in the position of caring for a spouse or a parent, a loved one who is no longer able to care for themselves, or if you know someone who is, this hour will be worth the listening. Now, let's tune in to today's edition of CareGiver Reality with your hosts, David Levy and Paul Vadiato.
Good evening, South Florida, America, and the world. It's Tuesday night, so this must be the CareGiver Reality Hour, and I'm your host, David Levy, and I'm here with Paul. Paul?
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome.
All right, and we have a special guest who we'll get to in a little bit. His name is Barry, and he was on about 7 or 8 months ago. It's a very interesting story. It has gone in many different directions, and I'm going to let him tell the story when he's ready. Caregiver Reality has been moving forward in a lot of different directions over the last couple of months. You know, we're all about first education, and I'll tell you in a few moments, we've just made a new affiliation for an educational project with a group out in California that is a consortium of 13 community colleges that are trying to teach caregiving to nurses, not the clinical kind, the non-clinical kind that we have espoused for the last couple of decades. And they came to me under the banner of the American Association for Caregiver Education, and they asked if I would be an advisor to them, and so I said, yeah, I'd welcome the opportunity. Anything that advances non-clinical family caregiving into the clinical realm, I'm all for it. Paul, how was your week?
David, it was not the best of weeks, and we just been going through a roller coaster, as I had said last week, and I guess what really characterized or culminated the week was another fall, and I tell you, for our listeners that are out there that have loved ones, falls are just so devastating, and it was just in a moment of carelessness. My bride was sitting on the edge of a sofa. She slipped, and the next thing she was on the floor, neck twisted, black and blue, and she's laying there on the floor, and a million thoughts coming in from what went wrong to what happened. Is she okay? And
you weren't in the room when she fell?
It was in the next room, and I saw it happen. I just could not get there in time. So we've been dealing with the aftermath of that, which again means doctors and imaging, and of course she's been in a lot of pain. Not a good week.
No, I understand that. Mine has been a klutz this week. All right.
How so?
Well, she kicked the table and broke a toe.
Oh.
All right. So there's not much you can do for broken pinky toes except tape them to the other one. And then today she slipped and broke her pinky. And so I had to improvise a splint. I didn't have one. You suggested a popsicle stick, but I found one of those little plastic bags that has a knife, a spoon, and a fork.
Yeah.
I snapped the end of the fork off in gauze. I stuck it under her finger, and Dr. Levy prevailed. So, like I said, broken bones are part of the game. Those of you out there that are dealing with family caregiving as informal family caregivers, the one thing, as Paul said, that you can always plan on is the unexpected. And no matter how careful you may be, and I had put all 4 of my dogs, both dachshunds, the bloodhound, and the teddy bear Pomeranian, in charge of keeping an eye on her. And every one of them let me down. The quality of help these days is just insufferable.
I yelled at the cat, believe me.
All right. Well, I would have at least expected the bloodhound to have gotten in there and blocked that toe kick.
Yeah.
All right. But anyway, I do want to mention a couple of things because when I get to Barry, I really don't want to take many interruptions. As you know, those of you that have been following us, We have aligned ourselves with medical research charities, an organization, an umbrella organization that solicits the military and federal employees for charitable contributions, and underneath their banner are about 27 to 30 medical research charities in various denominations: Alzheimer's, heart, breast cancer, you name it. And each week we've kind of been doing a little shout out to one of the individual or one of the constituent organizations. And today it's the Leukemia Research Foundation, and they're dedicated to conquering all blood cancers by funding research into their causes and cures and enriching the quality of life of those touched by these diseases. As a result of the vital programs that LRF, Leukemia Research Foundation, does, not only are countless lives served by the foundation, but with the development of new treatments resulting from LRF-funded research, countless lives are also saved. They provide many organizations with one-year $100,000 grants to select new investigator research, and this allows young and innovative scientists the opportunity to act on their ideas and move ahead without being caught up in a lot of the medical research bureaucracy. I think that's a tremendous, tremendous way to be. If you'd like to take a further look, they are under www.allbloodcancers.org. That's www.allbloodcancers.org. Or you can see them under the www.medicalresearchcharities.org. That's medicalresearchcharities.org. And just click on their website participants and go on down to leukemia. It's a big issue these days. It always has been. And I think the idea of these individual grants that allow young, up-and-coming scientists to get a shake at doing things that are outside the box, so to speak, I think is a wonderful opportunity.
David, I lost my mom at age 69 to leukemia, and it's a brutal disease. In terms of family caregiving, you just see your loved one just slowly, piece by piece, disintegrate, and every time the blood work comes back and the white count is up, you start looking at other things and you start considering things that you would never think that you would consider. So, I'm glad that MRC is doing the fundraising that they are. That basic research is so very important. And for those of you who are listening who have a loved one with leukemia, take the time to go onto the website, see what is new out there in the way of research, and, you have our support in the caregiving that you're doing. It is so hard. I've been there.
Yeah, I know. I lost my mom to lung cancer when I was 30. And it was, she was my guiding light. It was real tough.
It is.
To lose that opportunity to have her around, watch my kids get raised. And, one of their underlying organizations is a lung cancer organization, a breast cancer organization, and a number of other cancers that each fall into a specific category. But leukemia is certainly pervasive out there. And if you got a few extra dollars and you have the desire and you've been affected in your family by leukemia, or you'd like to see it prevented from happening to your family, it's an excellent place to make a donation.
Nice way to make a memorial gift.
Absolutely. And, you're listening to us on CareGiverReality.com. You can call us on 1-888-565-1470. We're on iHeartRadio. And AMP2 TV. So you can catch us almost anywhere, including WNNradio.com. And that's the radio station's streaming video. More and more, this idea of radio and streaming video is becoming very much the forward movement of the entertainment field, news, and it's really up and coming. And I think that our producer, Freddie, who's not in here at the moment, but his son Freddie is, we have to call him F Big and F Little, has been at the forefront of doing this. And he is really making big strides. and we're very lucky he's taking us along with him. Our numbers last week were up 20%. This week are up 20% over last week. Our audience is growing, as you know, and I've repeated it. Our market demographic, the folks that are listening, are typically 44 to 65. It's a solid boomer, early Gen X, and these are the people most affected by caregiving at a time in their lives when many of them are still working, many of them are still raising children, and are finding the conflicts in the workplace related to caregiving a very difficult thing to balance. We've been making inroads in that area of workplace caregiving. It's a subject called presenteeism. It's the opposite of absenteeism, which means you're just not there. Presenteeism is one of those situations where you show up for work, but you're very other-directed because you've got a loved one and you're worried about this and you're worried about that. And so you can't give a full 8-hour or 10-hour day to your boss because you're caught up and consumed either in worry, depression, trying to coordinate things from afar. And the productivity loss in the workplace due to caregiving is enormous. And as our society ages, our workforce ages, and it puts more and more people into the caregiving category. Not that caregiving doesn't happen at all ages. You'll find it for 20 and 30-year-olds that have a special needs kid, a 20 or a 30-year-old whose brother or sister jumped off a diving board and broke their neck and are now quadriplegics, early onset MS, multiple sclerosis, and a variety of other things. But one of the things that we're seeing more and more of, and you need to be aware of it, is we are seeing early onset dementia, not just Parkinson's, but temporal frontal lobe, which happens because there's some kind of a cerebral event. It could be a stroke, it could be an accident, whatever it may be. And I was having a discussion today with one of the researchers from the RAND organization who just put out that study called Hidden Heroes, which is all about caregiving in the military. And there's a group of folks between the ages of 20 to 40, whether you're post 9/11 or Vietnam War or whatever it may be. Yes, our greatest heroes are being taken care of, but we're seeing a lot more incidents coming back from Iraq and from Afghanistan. These young men and women, not only have they lost limbs, but they're suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. They're suffering from head injuries. A lot of those head injuries look a lot like dementia. And so it's a very confusing group of folks to try. It's one thing when you age into an illness. It's another thing when, bam, your Humvee is hit by an improvised explosive device and your brains are rattled all around the inside of there, and you've also suffered physical illness. And so this is a very special group of people. They number over 5 million. Close to 1.3 million are post 9/11. And while the VA has been working very hard, they really don't have a lot of programs beyond what they're doing to deal directly with the wounded veteran in terms of his clinical needs and some of their psychiatric or psychological needs. But in most cases, or many cases, you're dealing with a young spouse who may have children who are 4, 5, 6, or 7, whether they like it or not. They are de facto caregivers, meaning it's going on in the house and they've got responsibilities, or they're being impacted by what's happening to dad or mom. And this is something that, as a country, we need to recognize. Not only do we clap for them when they come home at the airport, which is great, Memorial Day weekend certainly honored an awful lot of our veterans, but we have to remember that a lot of them have come back not quite intact, all right, mentally, physically, and in many other ways, so that we have an ongoing responsibility to the military caregiver to be even more aware that they've probably got a lifetime's worth of caregiving in front of them. My guest tonight is a gentleman by the name of Barry Sinrod. We had him on much earlier. We'll go back and give you kind of an update, but you kind of had your hand raised while I was talking about the military. Was there something you wanted to say, Barry?
Well, I wanted to say something about dementia. I've been very aware that it is now showing up in the National Football League. In fact, a good friend of mine who's an ex-NFL player was just diagnosed with it, and he's barely 50 and lives locally, as a matter of fact. So if I'm not mistaken, I think there's virtually 100 people who've passed where they've actually sent the brains for analysis, and they've come up with that as a result of the hits and bruises during the NFL career.
Correct.
They ended up
Well, they are
having that problem.
probably, if you stop and think about it, we've been playing football for what, 100 years?
Yeah.
Or damn close to it.
Right.
And in the old days when it was a leather helmet,
Yep.
and not that helmets even today, no matter how good they are, you get nailed hard and it rattles you around even in a well-lined helmet. And the macho attitude of take some painkillers, get up, square your shoulders, and get back in the game is part of the whole thinking
Right, and
inside
they've
of
also-
Major League Sports.
Right, they've also started to recognize now concussions very much so, and there are protocols in all the major leagues that have the protocol that if the doctor says you have a concussion, they won't let them play.
Right, but the issue becomes they won't let them go back into the game. But 2 weeks later, when they think they feel good, and these folks are being paid $4, $5, $6, $7 million, whether they show up or they don't, the team expects them to be there.
Right.
And you know, when you are an exquisite athlete like a lot of these professional football, basketball players, you have a very hard time when the whistle blows sitting on the sidelines. You want to get in there and do what you've been trained to do, what you want to do, and that's to give a great performance in front of a Super Bowl or a football stadium or in front of the TV camera. And it's very hard to contain the idea that you're no longer going to be a competitive superhero. And that's very hard on people whose life and training has pointed them in the direction. But what we're seeing also, Barry, is that even at the high school and junior high school level, when it goes beyond flag football, all right, and these kids are getting banged around because they're doing what they see on TV, we're seeing a lot more younger children. And when I say younger, I'm 8, 9, 10 through mid-teens that are playing serious level at their age football and are coming up with some of the same kinds of concussion and traumatic injury to their brains that we have no idea what does that mean 10, 20, 30 years from now, and if they go on to a career in a professional sport. You know, I guarantee you, sight unseen, that there's probably, couldn't guess how many tens of thousands of professional football players have been around since football went professional, that for years and years and years were never understood, just like it was with boxers, until we finally saw a Muhammad Ali, who really became kind of the poster boy in boxing for what all that traumatic brain injury is about. Paul?
I just wanted to go back to the military for a second. We see so many of these bumper stickers, "We support the troops." These injuries that, David, you just spoke about, they don't have politics attached to them. They don't care if you're left, right, center, or where you are, but this is really what Support Your Troops is all about. And what the VA needs now more than anything else is money and the resources, the people, to help these veterans that are coming home. If you speak to their families, the families are struggling, and our program is the CareGiver Reality Hour, and it's not only the veteran that you see that's been injured, it's the ones that you don't see, the family, the children, the husband, the wife, whatever it may be.
Brothers and sisters.
They need that support, and they are invisible. And this is, for those of you that are in the cars driving home right now, these are the people that you need to be thinking about. And we spoke earlier about being generous. This is where you want to be generous.
Right. And many of you who are driving home or are listening to us across the country and around the world, you may be dealing with a loved one or a spouse.
We would
who's
love
been
to
in
hear
the
those
military
stories.
and know exactly what we're talking about. We're coming to you tonight as the Caregiver Reality Hour at caregiverreality.com, WWNN 1470 here in South Florida, and you can call us on 1-888-565-1470. Before we take a little break, last week we talked about one of our educational components. Like, we're dealing with many, just like the community college situation that I mentioned. But Brenda Bryant, who is our Chief Educational Officer, has been training a group of facilitators to go in and do caregiver support for the LGBT community, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. And we have been active now in trying to raise the funds to do that using what's called crowdfunding. And if those of you who are listening who don't know, but it's using the internet to attract investment. And we're using the American Association for Caregiver Education, which has a charitable designation and a not-for-profit. And it's on crowdrise.com/LGBT family. That's crowdrise.com at LGBT family. And if you feel that this is a worthy cause, I'm not looking to have you empty your wallets tonight, but this is a very underserved community that is no different when it comes to aging, disease, and illness, but yet in many cases have their own unique set of issues in terms of some of the things that we don't think about. Besides being sick, you have to make very sure that you've spelled out clearly, your advance directives, your durable powers of attorney, your domestic partnership relationships, so that you can transfer assets to your significant other or loved one, and that it can happen in a way, because we don't have marriage approval in the gay community across the United States. When we do, then at least they will have the same inheritance capability that any other heterosexual couple might have, whether or not they die with or without a will.
And legally, that's a specialty unto itself.
Yep. And one of the people I was talking to about that recently, we had lunch, or dinner rather, a week or so ago, was Scott Solkoff, who's a tremendous elder law attorney, and I was discussing with him just how much is involved with domestic partnerships and the issues of the LGBT community. And we'll have him on in a couple of weeks, and I want him to speak to some of those issues because they're unique and require some very careful crafting on the part of the attorney doing it, so that they get it right the first time, and so that the protections that everybody needs, regardless of gender, whatever, you're entitled to the basic protections that the law grants. And even if it doesn't grant you marriage for the moment, it still has a capability to protect you and your loved one for the things that you're entitled to do.
And those caregivers still struggle.
Absolutely.
And they feel the same feelings that all of us as caregivers feel, and they just have one extra step for advocacy within a system that creates another obstacle.
You're absolutely right. You know what? We're going to go to a break. And when we come back, I'm going to reintroduce Barry.
Great.
I want to give a little bit of background, and then I want him to tell a most interesting story that's going on. So, if we have the opportunity, we're going to go to our break. You're listening to us on WWNN 1470 AM. You want to call us 1-888-565-1470. We'd be happy to take your call.
The Easy Living program offers personal emergency response solutions, plus access to home, health, and personal services, allowing older adults the ability to enjoy their retirement years in the comfort and familiar surroundings of their own home. Easy Living is a local provider of Guardian Medical Monitoring Personal Response Systems, who have been providing monitoring for over 80 years. From in-home to mobile GPS alert buttons, we offer many solutions to meet an individual's needs. Call today at 561-496-2367 for our Delray Beach office, or toll free at 888 888-522-3279 to get more information. In addition to the medical alarm pendant or personal emergency response solutions, services range from medication dispensers, home-delivered meals, and referrals to home and nursing care to geriatric care management. Visit our website, easylivingprogram.com, and let Easy Living provide the solutions for seniors desiring an independent lifestyle. Call 561-496-2367. Easy Living offers seniors an alternative to moving from the home they love. Call today, 561-496-2367. Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse or loved one who can no longer take care of himself or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Do you feel burned out, frustrated, and just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, lawyers, and mental health professionals and have come to realize that they don't have practical answers to these questions. What you need are experts, non-clinical family caregivers with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. People who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. Who you need are David Levy or Paul Vadiato. Reach David at david@caregiverreality.com or reach Paul at caregiverreality.com and let them help you pick the right path towards improving the quality of life for you, the caregiver, and your loved one.
My name is Paul, and I am a spousal caregiver. I am one of 50 million caregivers just here in the United States alone. I keep my wife safe. I help maintain her dignity. I help give her the best quality of life possible, and above all, I am her advocate. Yes, there are times that I get angry, I become frustrated with the system. Sometimes I feel resentment and I deal with guilt, and I know that I am not alone. When I need support, I turn to CareGiver Reality for help. My name is Paul Vadiato, and I am president of CareGiver Reality. Find us at www.caregiverreality.com. Help is a click away.
This is CareGiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy and caregiver expert Paul Vadiato, who ask you to call in and speak with him on the air toll-free at 888-565-1470. That's 888-565-1470 to share a story or important information. Now, back to today's Caregiver Reality Show.
And we're back, and for those of you that are listening, and we hope everybody is, we're at 1-888-565-1470, or maybe you're watching us on the CaregiverReality.com website. Just click on Live Show, and there we are. Or iHeartRadio, anywhere in the world, click Florida, and go down to WNN, and we are there. Anyway, I want to get back to our guest tonight, Barry Sinrod. And we first met Barry about 6 months ago. He had contacted me, and I had come to one of my support groups. And his wife, Shelley, has been suffering for many years with Parkinson's and Parkinsonian dementia. And at the time, she was starting to definitely get worse. And Barry was on a personal crusade to find out why, if he had advanced directives that tell us what we can and can't do, he could not find somebody that could allow her to pass quickly and without pain, essentially an assisted suicide type of event. And what he ran into was the entire medical, clinical, legal system. And we had a discussion the night that he was on that our advanced directives say you can't go ahead and implement care beyond what that person wanted, but you can't take it upon yourself to end that person's life. And so Barry has been researching. He's a brilliant guy. He writes books. He'll self-describe what it is that he does. And his wife is still alive. I think the hospice doctor said today, not in the next few days, but she will pass within the next few weeks. The unfortunate thing for Barry is he's been hearing that story for a while now. and it's very frustrating. Even though, and he certainly loves his wife dearly, but none of us want to see a loved one. He's been married for 50 years, wants to see a loved one suffer. So Barry, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me back, David.
All right. And give us a little idea of what happened when you went out on your quest to see what could happen in trying to find an organization or a location that might allow you an assisted suicide opportunity to put your wife, and this is a lousy way to put it, out of her pain and I wanted to say out of her misery, but tell me what you went through.
First let me say that we don't use that. They don't want to use that term, and they really shouldn't. At the moment, I can't think of what the other one is, but assisted suicide is not what they call it.
Okay.
But I have been literally around the world trying to figure out why our living will is useless. And to those people who are listening out there who think that they have it all solved, I could tell you firsthand, our living wills are identical, my wife's and myself's, and they were updated as late as last August, just a few months before she had her crash, if you will, and into very bad dementia. So first we had 24/7 help, and then she was getting worse and worse, and it just was too difficult for me to watch and to see her suffer as much. And
under your own roof.
Under my own roof, and that was for 3 or 4 months, and it's very costly. I'm fortunate that I have insurance, but anybody out there listening, it does cost about $15,000 a month. That's a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
And so I spoke to my attorney and visited with her, and she read to me the living will line by line, word by word, and said to me, Barry, everything that you have in here is legally drawn up to meet the standards of the United States of America, and in this case, the state of Florida. And so they should follow your directions. Well, the next thing that happened was, unfortunately, I had to place her in a nursing home, which was another awful ordeal I wouldn't wish on anyone. And I wanted them to follow the living will, which says in just basic terms that if I have a terminal condition, which my wife does, and if I am in end stage, which she is, I want everything withheld. I don't want to be fed. I want to go peacefully. I don't want to be in pain, and so on and so forth. I ran up against a stone wall at the nursing home. They said, we cannot do that. And I said, why? We read the living will over and over again. I spoke to my attorney again. And when I spoke to the attorney again, she said, you have every right, but. And the but is the doctors are the ones that make the decision, not you. And even though I read it to the doctors and with them and stood right beside them, they said, we cannot do anything to hasten death. And so even when I said to them that my wife says, as I do in my will, that we do not want any food or nutrition, we want to just pass, they said, absolutely not. They said they are required by the United States and by the state of Florida.
And the Hippocratic Oath.
Right. To even at this point, back in November, and even until now she's not eating at all, and she is, for all intents and purposes, she's gone except that she's breathing. And now she's in hospice, and hospice, you would think, they have a whole bank of attorneys. They own 3 or 4 facilities now in the state of Florida, and I've met with them, and they said that they are required by the law to bring a spoon to her mouth, and if she opens her mouth, they feed her. If she doesn't, they don't feed her. And so now what they are doing at this point is giving her what they call pleasure foods. They're giving her ice cream, applesauce, and water. They're telling me she's not getting more than 300 calories a day, which is awful. You can't possibly live on that. And so I've said, why even do that? Why not, please, let her go peacefully? That's what she wanted. That's what I want. Why does she have to suffer and lay in bed? Why does she have to lose weight? She's lost, I'm almost ashamed to say, she's lost more than half of her body weight, and she's just not a non-person. And then I was so angry and upset by the whole thing that I called the Netherlands. I made a phone call to the Netherlands and spoke to the people in government there. And interestingly enough, I found out that for those people who don't know, they're one of the few very progressive countries. They allow euthanasia, but it's done on a very strict basis, which I agree with. Just quickly to just tell you what it is the person would have to come before a court and say that they wish to be put to sleep. They have to have 3 or 4 doctors agree to it, and then they have to come back 31 days later. They make sure they give you an adequate time to change your mind and be sure what you want to do. Then you come back in 31 days, say the same thing, and then they will peacefully put you to sleep. However,
do they do it, or do they just supply you with the medications or whatever?
The Netherlands are very progressive. They do it. They have a facility and they do that. But the problem that I found out from other sources is that because my wife suffers from dementia, and the same would be for Alzheimer's patients, she would not be able to go to court and speak to the court and say, I want to go to sleep. And the Netherlands, after I think 20 years or 25 years, they only recently recognized, they opened it up, and it's the wrong choice of words, but it's wonderful that now, for me it's too late, but for my wife it's too late, is that you can go to the Netherlands, and if the person has Alzheimer's and dementia and cannot speak, you may speak for them, as I would, as I'm my wife's surrogate and she's mine, and we have the living will, and I'd be able to read the living will and say what my wife's wishes are. You still have to wait the 31 days, come back and do it again, and then they would put her to sleep in a peaceful way.
Barry, a question for you. Is your wife in pain?
They say she's not. It bothers me tremendously that this is what the doctors say, the top doctors say. They say she's not feeling any pain. I don't know how they know that.
Well, don't they have her on morphine?
Well, that just started, but the morphine just started within a week ago. But up until now, she has not been on morphine. They've been trying to feed her. They don't give her any pain meds. They said she's not in pain.
Well, the pain meds are the morphine.
Well, no, not the morphine. Excuse me. I misspoke. The medication that they're giving her is for the Parkinson's, and it's to prevent her tremors.
Right.
And so it's not morphine. It's lorazepam or something like that. Mm-hmm. Morphine was only added this week because they said that they are sensing that she has pain. I don't understand that either.
Did they explain what determined that change?
Well, because she can't speak, and at this point she can't even move, what they say is they notice changes in skin color, the temperature of her skin. Maybe she winced or moved in some way. She can not move at all. But I spoke to them this morning, and they said that they noticed a major change in the last few days, which was that she seemed to be agitated. And that's why they gave her the lorazepam, and now they're giving her the Risperdal and morphine.
And they're giving her low doses, or they're giving her more as they sense the pain to increase?
Again, I only asked a very logical question to the doctor. I said, why can't you give her more so that she can pass? There is no doubt that she's going to pass. I mean, I wish it wasn't that way, but...
Well, when it says, and you said it earlier, thou shalt not hasten death, and there's a lot of liability issues that surround the compassion of what we would like to do. And it's very unfortunate, especially for a spouse in the position that you're in.
Right. Well, let me add also, one other group that I called. I called a group called Death with Dignity, and they are based in Portland, Oregon. And I offered to fly out there. I offered to give them money. I said I wanted to get involved somehow. I said, why don't we have that law in Florida? The people in Oregon, they wrote the law for Oregon, Washington, and Vermont. And when I told them my wife's story, they said, oh my God, they said, Barry, we wouldn't be able to help you because none of those laws take into consideration Alzheimer's and dementia.
Wow.
You would be SOL. And there's nothing that we could do. And they said that they are studying state by state, but they do it under the radar because it's a very, very controversial subject.
And very touchy.
And very touchy.
Right. You know, in preparation for you coming on, I was doing some research on the internet, and I came across a website that I had mentioned to you called Compassion and Choices. It's compassionandchoices.org. And they, too, are an organization advocating that those with a terminal illness have a right to decide for themselves. And they had a story from a gentleman whose first name is Dustin, and the heading on the article was "Patients Should Decide." And he opens the article by saying, "I am a Montanan living with a disability, and I support the right of terminally ill Montanans to make their own end-of-life decision." And he was willing and open to talk about it. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of his bullet points because I think it focuses on some of the issues that you faced, even though your wife doesn't have the cognitive capability to go through the process that he did. And but these were very telling remarks. And he said, "Self-determination is one of the characteristics that defines human dignity. Society is based on people taking responsibility for their decisions and their lives. If individuals have the right to decide how to live, they also should have the absolute right to decide the manner of their death when faced with an imminent terminal illness." At age 39, he has a terminal illness called Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. And he said, "I value the expertise of medical professionals. However, I alone reserve my right as the patient to decide which treatments I receive, and I believe my decisions outweigh those of anyone else regarding my medical care. In a free society, personal choice regarding medical treatment should be a fundamental human right." He goes on to say, "After a lifetime of taking responsibility for myself and making my own decisions, when death approaches, haven't I earned the right to decide how I leave the world? If not, what have I earned? A situation where people who hardly know me will decide the experience of my death? How can someone else's perspective on my life outweigh my right to decide how it ends?" And I thought that was...
Says it all.
Says it all. It was
it sure does.
beautifully said. And if one had the cognitive capability, which unfortunately your wife didn't, to say what Dustin has said here, I have a feeling that because of your 50 years of marriage and how well you knew each other, that more than likely she would have espoused the same thing, because I hear between your words the same kind of statement, in that if I can decide how I live, why can't I not decide how I should be allowed to pass if I have a terminal illness?
Right.
Barry?
Well, I think what you just read is wonderful, and it brings up another problem. It's wonderful that he was able to espouse that at this particular point in time, and it makes me think that I've rethought how I want to pass. My wife and I have identical living wills, but because of what I've been through with my wife, I'm changing mine. I want to be able to make that decision as this man in Montana does. I'm going to have to make it outside the United States because they won't let it happen here. Another thing that maybe I got to ask you, David and Paul, the question is, had I known, of course you don't know,
before it happens.
Before it happens. When my wife was diagnosed 3 years ago, she was fine for 2 years or 2.5, and then all of a sudden it just happened overnight. So I'm thinking that, like this man, I don't know how much longer he has to go, but when you get to the point where my wife is, where you're over the edge,
right,
you can't make the statement. But on the other hand, would my wife have wanted me to take her to, for argument's sake, to the Netherlands when she still had her cognitive behavior and was still okay, but not great, and have her put to sleep, as opposed to waiting too long and then you're off the scale? I don't want that to happen to me, but at the same time I have my own doubts in my mind. I'm saying, if I were to be diagnosed with that and they said that, you're going to die in a few years, would I want to go now? Would I want to wait a year? If I wait longer than a year, 2 years, and I fall off the top, then I have no choice.
It's a very difficult question. When I was reading through their website, one of the things they alluded to, although I was not able to find it, I'm going to have to ask Scott, was that they were coming up with a dementia clause that would, in advance directives, that would say further that if I have dementia, and I cannot say it for myself, but I want you to know that I do not wish to live. And if there is a vehicle for euthanasia, assisted suicide, whatever it may be, I want that. Whether or not that would be valid or not, I've got to go check with the experts.
Well, our living will says everything that you're saying, except it doesn't say the word dementia. But it's the same idea. It
Right,
says,
but this is the back door to exactly what you're saying. If I can no longer say it, and if I could, and the rules were that I had to say it in front of a judge and come back 31 days later and say it again for argument's sake, that I'm telling you now, that's what I want, and that's a completely, a horse of a different color.
Right.
But it certainly leads to the issue that you're talking about. If we know we have a terminal illness in 3 years, but yet, and the argument always arises, well, you never know when the medical profession is going to come up with something that today might be terminal, i.e. AIDS, and once we kind of developed the cocktail, it wasn't always a terminal illness. Now it's a chronic illness. And if you knew that your terminal illness could be chronic, would you still feel the same way? And I guess it's something that we don't know until we get there. And when it comes to issues that involve dementia as well, we have no way of knowing. At least this gentleman, Dustin, still has his cognitive functions, even though he has Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. And I guess at any point in time, we all have the ability, to buy a gun, to take an overdose, to do something that would allow us the non-assisted suicide if we felt it was a one-way street, although there's a lot of religious and societal overtones attached to doing that.
It's just not the right thing to do. In fact, as an aside, let me just tell you that at some point when I was so angry and upset at the system that I wanted to take my wife back home and do what she wanted, which was not to be fed. And the doctors made it clear to me that if I did that, I could be charged with murder.
Well, or assisting a homicide.
Right. And that it's ridiculous.
Barry, to address your question about yourself, though, I think which is a very interesting question, because hindsight is always 20/20. And we never know what that period is going to be. It's like when you had to make the decision about your wife leaving your roof for another one, that wasn't an easy decision. And which day to do it, what week to do it,
where.
That was not a clear answer. And as we're going through it ourselves, we don't necessarily know the continuum of where we're going to go. And I think that's really where that personal choice comes in, is that you're the one that has to eventually buy the plane ticket or have that one who holds your medical power of attorney buy that plane ticket for you and take you for your last go-round.
Right, exactly, and that's what I was saying. Looking into the future, if heaven forbid it was me, at what point do you do it? How do you do it? Can you do it?
Right. How many angels dance on the head of a pin?
Right,
you're asking very imponderable questions, although they're very real.
I think that we don't talk politics on this particular show, but the fact that this man is from Montana, you couldn't be any different than being from Florida and being from Montana on every social issue. So it's interesting that on that issue, we're all alike. It doesn't matter what color you are or what party you're with or whatever.
And you're not really allowed, once you've reached that point, to kind of become a citizen of Washington or Oregon after the fact. You kind of have to be there beforehand if you're going to try and avail yourself of
David, let me correct you.
Okay, please do.
There's ways around everything legally. I've talked to those people. Again, it was too late for my wife, but they said that there is leeway within that law. They said if you come to the state of Washington, Vermont,
make a declaration.
You could stay at a hotel. If you just showed that you're staying there, I don't know what. There is no.
Well, I know when you come
residency
to
requirement.
Florida and if you make an affirmative statement that, I live here and I'm going to homestead, in terms of, declaring this to be my primary residence and my primary state, it's a very quick process. But, it's interesting, and we'll have to see how a lot of this stuff unfolds. Barry, I'll get back to you in just a minute. We
Sure.
have about 10 minutes. I do want to raise another issue. One of the things when it regards family caregiving, and Paul and I have talked about this on numerous occasions, there's all different shades and colors. I don't mean that literally, although there is, but there's a lot of cultural differentiation when it comes to caregiving, how you were raised, what are your societal norms, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the organizations that I have been dealing with, and we're about to get much more active, and I don't know how many more organizations I can get active with, but this is the Association for Alzheimer's Awareness, but it is focused on people here in the United States from the Caribbean. And actually one of the leaders of it is one of the ambassadors from the country of Trinidad, from the island of Trinidad. And we're beginning to gear up and to be able to offer a service here in Florida to those of Caribbean background who have different societal norms, who have a different way of approaching certain illnesses, treatments, etc., to try and drive a more culturally sensitive, just like we're doing with the LGBT community, is that we are trying, because there's no, as Paul would tell you, we talk about it all the time, there's no one size fits all for caregiving. Whatever you've done is not necessarily what the next person could, should, or would do. And certainly as it relates to the difference between ethnicity, religion, cultural background, all different aspects of it, we have to be sensitive to those things in order to be, support caregiving and be good caregiver supporters. And so I'm very interested to see how this initiative moves forward, because we're always trying to refine what we do at CareGiver Reality to be sensitive to issues that particular groups have. And I think this will give us an opportunity, and that's the Association for Alzheimer's Awareness.org. If you'd like to go online, see what they do. They were linking their site to us today so that if anyone from the Caribbean community had questions to ask, they could post it on the website or send it to David at CareGiverReality.com or Paul at CareGiverReality.com, and we will try and give you the best advice and to try and be aware of those cultural uniqueness factors to make it relevant.
David, I know we begin the program by starting from Boca Raton, Florida, and the United States and the world, but we are very cognizant that folks that are listening to our program via the internet all over the country, all over the world, different resources, different backgrounds, we are sensitive to what is going on in your world, and we want to be responsive to that. So please do let us know those type of issues that are of concern to you and that we can be of some help with, because this website, caregiverreality.com, it does exist for you, our listeners.
And you can see this show will be posted in the morning.
Yes.
We did a great show this past Wednesday from one of the support groups, and we talked about the issue that last Tuesday and the previous Tuesday we had spoken to Vicki Kind, who is the PhD bioethicist on what we call emotional divorce. And unfortunately, not me, but when they went to transfer the digital information to the website, it got corrupted, and unfortunately we lost it. But I will say, and then I want to comment from you, Barry, on that, but every one of those caregivers, many of whom have accepted the concept of emotional divorce, where a loved one who is very ill and demented, all right, who can no longer be a functioning part of your life, that you have an opportunity to at least start to heal those wounds in anticipation of their passing. I mean, I've said it as eloquently as I might like to, but that you have a right to a life as well. And as we talked last week, when Vicki put it on her website, she had a firestorm of people saying, how can you break your vows? How can you do this and that? But they didn't recognize that we were really speaking in terms of spouses and significant others that have advanced dementia, and where it's not so much that they don't know, but that whole life of person, spouse, couple, sharing is no longer there, and people get very alone and lonely. Barry, I know you want to say something.
You hit the nail on the head. I want to say I'm only one person, and I've had a mini firestorm of people who have really upset me because they haven't walked in my shoes. And just what you're saying, that Vicki had a whole firestorm of people saying, how can you do that? You're breaking your vows or whatever. We are talking about a situation that exists for a long period of time. I've been married for 50 years. My wife has been sick for 3 years. And after 3 years of having no contact, no verbal contact, nothing, it's time, based on what many people have told me, professional people, it's time. I have to think about another life.
Yes, you do.
I love my wife dearly. I don't want her to die.
I don't think it's ever a question of love.
But it's no one's. It is no one's business. And that's. I'm sorry that Vicki had that, but those people are ignorant because they haven't walked in the shoes.
Well, and that was exactly what she said.
It brings up religious beliefs and all that other stuff.
Well, everything that happens inside of a situation, just like we're talking about euthanasia, happens inside of religious, ethnic, moral sets of circumstances, and certainly emotional divorce does as well. But I must tell you, I had 14 people in that group, and there wasn't one of them. There were a few there that were already seeing other people, even though their loved one was still alive, but advanced stages of dementia. Mm-hmm. And those that had a loved one with advanced stages of dementia but hadn't done it, it was their choice, but no one condemned anybody for doing it. And I see that we only have
about a minute left.
Mm-hmm. Right, and Barry, I want to thank you so much for your candor, the opportunity to follow along with what's been going and happening to you, your wife, and your life. And I know that sometime in the next month or so, unfortunately or fortunately, your wife will pass, and at some convenient time after that, I would love to have you back on and get a perspective on all of this.
It'd be my pleasure.
All right. Paul, as always.
Thank you.
To South Florida, America, and the world, this is the Caregiver Reality Hour. You will hear things here that you will not hear anywhere else. And we are your authority on family caregiving, and we support you 100%. So good night out there. Paul?
Caregivers, take care of yourself this week.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Reality Show. Each week, David Levy, a gerontologist, and Paul Vadiato, a caregiver expert with a combined over 25 years of experience, providing practical and realistic help to caregivers struggling to keep up with the needs of a loved one who are unable to care for himself or herself. To reach David Levy, email him at david@caregiverreality.com. Or to reach Paul Vadiato, email paul@caregiverreality.com. And find out more online. Just go to caregiverreality.com. See you next week for another exciting show of Caregiver Reality. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.